Hello, I'm AJ from Budget Brewers Binder. Welcome back to Tuesday Night Legacy, where we showcase Magic's most powerful formats. Tonight, we're doing another deck tech, and we're going in depth this time with Max on Doomsday. So, why Doomsday, Max?
Why Doomsday Max? So, I got into Legacy about a decade ago. I got in with Jeskai Delver, which two of those colors are not here tonight. I've been basically playing Fair Blue Legacy for the better part of those last 10 years. Could build almost like any Fair Blue deck under the sun. And then kind of when Magic, or like Legacy went like way downhill with like Oko and Astrolabe, and everything was just like miserable, especially within Fair Blue piles. I stopped playing Legacy for a while. I just like probably took like a 3-month break, which is the longest I've taken a break from this format because it's great. And over the course of that time, Doomsday had always been this like, just like this idea of a deck that's like so challenging and like only like really hard to play and pick up, and like the only people who play are like these absolute masters of the deck, and they have these like 20-page spreadsheets with all these piles and
all
so
this big information.
Right. So I never played Doomsday. I played like every other deck under the sun, except for like Death and Taxes and Elves. But like every like reasonable deck blue deck under the sun, but never really tried Doomsday. But I was just like sick of the format, so I was like, I may as well, right?
Yeah, about time.
So I put Doomsday together on Magic Online, and I went 3-2 in my first league, making like a dozen mistakes, either like throwing away games just from misbuilding piles. And then I played another one, and I went 4-0, 4-1 playing better, and 5-0 the one after that, and then I think just continuing to really do well, like driving with this deck. One of my favorite decks before I picked up Doomsday was actually Underworld Breach.
Nice.
Which, if you'll remember, was absolutely disgusting, busted one-card combo that existed in Legacy for all of 5 weeks, but
before it got banned out.
Rightfully so. But it was a ton of fun to play. It's like one-card combo deck that could really just play a fair game, and then jam its namesake card and just win out of nowhere.
Makes sense.
And Doomsday is the closest thing I've found to that. So I haven't been a dedicated Doomsday player, like nothing but Doomsday over the last 2 years or anything like that. But I've played probably more Doomsday than any other deck since I've picked it up. It's been just a lot of fun. I think that the decisions that you make are really like interesting, dynamic, and it's not very samey. So if you're like playing a bunch of Legacy over the course of the time, things can start to feel repetitive, like you just have the same opening over and over again, and then it kind of loses its fun. So with Doomsday, at least, there's like new puzzles to figure out, especially when you're just like passing the turn against an opponent. You can do all sorts of different things, from known information, unknown information, combat stat. Really just picking up Doomsday kept Legacy interesting for me. And this tempo version is another variant of Doomsday, with the normal version being a much faster deck. And this is kind of a Doomsday deck in name only. It's more of like a fair mid-range deck with a backdoor Doomsday clan.
Fair enough. Well, let's dive into that a little bit then, like what the cards are that make it more of a tempo list, like you've described it. We see here that there's 3 Malevolent Hermits. So tell us how that's played for you.
So the creature package is kind of what bridges this whole thing together, with like the Malevolent Hermits really acting as protection for the Doomsday.
Okay.
On this side, you can counter spells that like either like counter the Doomsday or would attempt to stop the Colossus Oracle. Or on the flip side, where it makes all your non-creature spells uncounterable, then your Doomsdays are just sticky. You can't stop it. So both sides of this really protect the Doomsday combo, while the 2/1 body is surprisingly relevant for just attacking.
Yeah, sometimes it gets there.
It does. I think on camera a few weeks ago, I soloed a Reanimator player with just a Hermit attacking for like
couple
turns.
Yeah. So then we'll also talk about the Murktide regions, because that's not in a lot of the more like combo-based variants. How does it play in this? What does it do for you?
Right. So Murktide is It's like Doomsday's 5 through 8. If you think of like your Haymaker cards in this deck, you got 4 Doomsdays and 4 Murktides. You work towards one of those.
Makes sense.
Both ways, you fill your graveyard with cantrips, because you're either sculpting to find your Doomsday kill, or just like interacting with your opponent, fatal pushes, whatever. You're filling your graveyard, and so you've either built to a Doomsday, or you've got a stocked graveyard for Murktide, and you cast an 8/8 Murktide, and normally what you'd have to do is attack over a couple turns for your opponent. 3 swings will do it.
Yeah.
It turns out that if you stack a Temporal Master on top of your deck, you can one-shot with Murktide, because your opponent, you attack, you draw, you play Murktide, you draw a Temporal for your turn, you attack with Murktide, you take 8, you attack again, and they're probably dead.
Usually tends to work that way.
And then there's some nice like micro synergies as well. Like we all know like Murktides feed off of other Murktides.
Yeah.
Murktide also feeds off of Doomsday. So Doomsday, when you build your 5-card pile, you exile the rest of your graveyard and library.
Oh.
So everything in your graveyard gets exiled.
There you go.
So, or leaves, either way, if it's going to your deck for the Doomsday pile, or it gets exiled because you didn't choose it. Either way, it's growing the Murktide. So you can actually like sometimes play a Murktide and then play a Doomsday after, and A, grow your Murktide, and B, just like stack Temporals on top, and then put a Thassa's Oracle somewhere down as like a backdoor kill in case the Murktide plan gets stopped somehow.
That makes sense.
So like the two plans actually, like, despite looking pretty different on their surface, actually synergize pretty well. Like also like Baleful Strix, stabilizes the board for Doomsday builds.
Yeah.
And draws a card, absorbs Pyroblast, so Murktide doesn't have to.
Sometimes relevant.
So yeah, I mean, everything kind of works together to create this strangely synergistic deck from a pretty disjointed plan. I've recently added Mystic Sanctuary because, as we all know from the Blue-Red Delver decks, it's pretty busted, and Mystical Tutor is banned in Legacy.
Yeah.
And this is the closest thing we have to it, and so I figure that regrowing a countered Doomsday isn't the worst thing in the world.
Can be better sometimes. Well, we talked a little bit about the main deck. Let's move a little bit towards the sideboard. We'll start on this side with 2 Engineered Explosives. What matchups are those really for in Legacy?
I want to do one more thing about the main deck.
Oh, let's come back then.
So, or 2 more things. So one of the things I'm least sure on is the split between Lotus Petal and Dark Ritual.
Okay.
When I started off, I had 4 Dark Rituals, 0 Lotus Petals.
Okay.
And Dark Ritual is great for turboing out Doomsday, winning your good matchups, just because you can like turn one on Doomsday.
Fair enough.
And pretty bad outside of that. Like you can kind of use it to accelerate on Murktide a little bit.
It helps a little bit, but it's not doing what you want it to.
Lotus Petal, however, is really nice because you can play it out on turn 2 to play a Baleful Strix through a Daze.
That's helpful.
You can play it out turn 2 to have Malevolent Hermit's activation up immediately.
Really strong.
So, in addition to all of the ways that Lotus Petal helps accelerate Doomsday, it actually just also complements the Fair Plan. But then Dark Ritual's a lot better at accelerating Doomsday.
Yeah.
So, I was on 4 Dark Rits. I moved over to 4 Lotus Petals for a time, and then I kind of just missed having Dark Rit sometimes.
Just being able to turn one it when you wanted it.
So I'm on a 2-2 split, and I'm letting Lady Luck decide which ones I draw.
Fair enough. All right. So we'll go back to the sideboard then.
Yeah.
So for Engineered Explosives, what matchup is that for in Legacy?
So that slot used to be Energy Flux,
Okay.
strictly for 8 cast.
Yeah.
But it was pretty narrow in that sense.
Yeah.
And at this point, lands has moved into having a lot more, explorations, mana bonds, like 1-drops there. Thran Foundry is a card that they play a lot.
Copper Foundry?
Thran Foundry.
Oh, yeah.
Shuffle graveyard into
That's a good
library
one.
card, yeah. Doomsday players know it well. So on 1, it's pretty good against lands for blowing up all of those things.
Nice.
On 0, it's good for blowing up Mox Diamond, Saga tokens, Field of the Dead tokens.
Has applications against taxes too.
Exactly. Application Death and Taxes, Goblins, Elves, you name it. So I've kind of moved it to be a slot that's still relevant against 8 cast. You can blow up Chalices, which is one of the big things that you need
Can
to
be
do
important.
there. Blow up Mox Opals, spare Thopters lying around that would block Murktide. So it's still good in that matchup, but it's just not as backbreaking, has more applications.
Fair enough.
So 2 EEs.
2 opposition agents. What are those for?
They destroy opposing combo matchups. So
That's not the answer I was expecting. I like it.
Ad nauseum tendrils, Infernal Tutor doesn't work, or it does work. You get the card.
It's kind of nice for you.
Doomsday, similarly, you get to pick their library and choose 5 cards, and you get them.
Just the disruptive aspect of it.
Yeah, so it's good there. It's also good against stuff like lands, where Cloud Rotation and Saga, you get control over both of those.
And you can get their lands if you want them.
Yes, exactly. And you can pop it out with Dark Ritual.
Yes, very true.
It's another point in favor of Dark Ritual, so that's why I'm playing Opposition Agent.
Makes sense.
What were your thoughts? What was your guess?
Those exact ideas.
Okay.
Like for combo, to stop combo, give you backbreaking when you go turn 1 ritual, or when they go to crack their fetch.
Oh, yeah. On the play, Just
Yeah.
turn 1 fetch, 1 go, they fetch. Hold on.
Dark Ritual Opposition Agent, my dual lane now.
Yeah, exactly.
So
You keep it too,
Yeah.
like after the game.
No, that's not how that works. We're not playing anti.
It is.
So we'll go on to Plague Engineer.
Yeah, so similar to Opposition Agent, but for the fair matchups.
Makes sense. Really good against the go wide strategies, humans, the goblin tokens from Storm.
Yeah, goblins, elves.
Elves.
Good against death and taxes as well.
True. True.
It's also pretty good against Delver.
Interesting.
Because if you can get their DRCs unflipped, you can name human and hit both DRC and Delver.
Ooh, you could turn 1 Dark Ritual into Plague Engineer. That's a whole different story.
Yeah, exactly. Or, Cavern on Phyrexian or Carrier. You can't even stop it.
I like that. We'll go to a card that I got pretty messed up by tonight. You'll see that on the video later. Counterbalance.
Yeah. So
2 of those.
2 of those. So I had 4 Leyline of the Voids in the sideboard for quite a while. Part of my main plan against Delver was Leyline of the Void.
Okay, makes sense.
You can basically make their Murktides uncounterable. Oh,
Uncastable.
sorry, uncastable.
Yeah.
My Murktides are uncountable, Cavern and Dragon. Theirs are uncastable. So yeah, uncastable, and then their DRCs can never flip, so Plague Engineer was lights out.
Yeah, makes sense.
But the problem was, so games where you drew Leyline were just so easy, and the games where you didn't, you had these 4 duds in your deck.
Yeah. Nothing feels worse than drawing it when you didn't need it.
Right, especially when you didn't open with it, and it's just like, it's
Good
so
card.
bad at that point. So I'm trying to come up with a more consistent plan against Blue-Red Delver, especially since they're playing a billion Pyroblasts.
Yeah.
And Counterbalance has this weird thing of being a blue card that's also kind of good against Pyroblast if you can get it into play.
If you can
because of all
land
the
it
one-drops.
before they get there. Yeah.
So the problem is like Baleful Strix and Murktide all done a Pyroblast. And so if I can just push through a Counterbalance, my fair plan can stick.
Makes sense.
And so the counterbalances are in there for that, and then they come in everywhere else Leyline would against combo decks.
Yeah. And then Brazen Borrower, 2 of those.
Kind of a catch-all.
Makes sense. Very
Obviously,
strong card.
Great against Merit Lage and stuff like that, but
What do I do with that?
I'll bring in 2. The 3/1 is surprisingly relevant with all the fair creature plan,
Mm-hmm.
and most decks at this point have something that they want to put into the battlefield.
Yeah.
I'm just good at bouncing those things.
It's good against opposing Murktides.
Even against you, bouncing a Burgee was relevant.
Yeah.
So, and I didn't know if you had Torpor Orb or something that you could wish for.
Sure.
So I didn't want to lose wish for Torpor Orb. So I bring in Brazen Borrower.
And then for the finishing out the sideboard, we have 1 Surgical Extraction. So tell me, is that just for graveyard hate, or is that also for anti-combo stuff?
I mean, it's kind of a little bit Graveyard Hate and anti-combo is a big overlap there, right?
Yeah.
The idea of the 1 is sometimes you need Graveyard Hate, a couple ley lines, and Doomsday lets you stack your deck. So say I can Doomsday with 1 mana left over, and I have a cantrip in hand.
Yeah.
I'm just Doomsday cantrip, draw the Surgical, have Surgical.
Have Surgical backup.
Exactly. So
like it.
against a combo deck, Reanimator strategy, you can Doomsday, draw Surgical, have Surgical.
Fair enough. And then Force Negation, that's a full 4 of. Is that so you have more free counter magic as well as to swap it out against certain matchups, the Force of Wills, or is that just so you have 8 copies?
There aren't any places where I currently cut Force of Will because of basically I'm either trying to play this fairish game plan or I'm trying to cut Doomsday against Delver. I cut all of the Doomsdays.
Okay.
And I'll start trimming Force of Wills, but I'm not bringing in Force of Negation at that point.
Yeah.
So, because I'm trying not to two-for myself. So I'm cutting these and bringing in Counterbalance, Plague Engineer, engineered explosives brazen bar.
Higher impact cards.
Right.
Makes
So-
sense. All right. Then because we know you're going to ask about it in the comments, don't worry. He does want to talk about some of his favorite piles with Doomsday.
Yeah,
What's
so-
your go-to normal pile?
So the problem with the tempo version is it doesn't have any like super easy same turn win piles like the other
Like the combo ones.
like the combo version does, where you like brainstorm and like have LEDs and cyclers and just immediately draw your 5 cards and win the game.
Yeah.
You can do it if you have like an abundance of mana and a cantrip in hand. You can do it like just very simply if you have enough devotion, like in play just off of like Murktide Regent or whatever, and they don't have removal. You can brainstorm and you have like extra cards in hand. You can brainstorm into Petal Oracle,
Makes sense.
play Petal Oracle,
That works.
and you have 4 devotion because of Murktide Regent.
There you
So
go. That'll work.
like technically you can win on the same turn. It's way more likely in this one that you pass the turn. Fortunately, the deck's built to do that. And one of the most straightforward piles of this version is Temporal Mastery, which is time walks since you stack them there. And then you have Consider, and then Thassa's Oracle, and then Unearth. So you Temporal, Consider, you bin the Oracle, you draw the Unearth, you cast
Unearth the Oracle.
Exactly. So, playing around Endurance, you want to, can't quite do this, but what you could do, just like with these same cards, is just put whatever here, bin a random card, draw Oracle. If you have 3 mana instead of 2, you can just bin that. You have 2 cards in your graveyard, the Doomsday and whatever you just binned, the Unearth. And so, if they Endurance you, 2 cards shuffle in, you still have 2 devotion, you can still win.
Makes sense.
So, sometimes you can just do Temporal, Consider Cavern Oracle, like that. And if it's super urgent, you just... Well, actually, what I just told you was a lie, because Consider will put itself in the graveyard, so that will not be Endurance. But, yeah, trickier to be Endurance than you think. But, Consider, or Masters exile themselves. You have, Baleful Strix, Cavern Oracle, it's like a little bit slower, but you can still get there. Baleful Strix blocks, which is great for extending turns.
Yeah.
If you have cantrips in hand during this, I'm kind of assuming here you have nothing going on. You can space things out way more easily. Put counter magic in your hand, put extra lands in hand, put Baleful Strixes in hand. Like, imagine if you have a bunch of mana, you're going late, you just go Temporal Strix, and then Temporal Cavern Oracle, right? So
You want Cavern before, because the Strix will draw the Temporal.
Oh yeah. Thank
Yeah.
you. Just like that.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Temporal, Strix, Souls, Temporal, and Thassa's. You win.
Yeah, exactly. Temporal, Strix, draw this, Temporal. Yeah, easy.
There you go. That's Doomsday for you. Max, we know you play a little bit online. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your
So yeah,
persona?
I am Maxtorion on Magic Online, Twitter, Magic Arena, if I can be coaxed into playing that again. On Twitter I post a lot of deck lists, some Doomsday, some not. I just kind of talk about what's working for me, and I also just like crack jokes in general. It's a good time, and if a deck is doing well in my hands, you know it's the deck. So it's a
There
nice
you
part
go.
about it. It's not me. So that's Maxtorion, Maxtortion. Check me out anywhere with that handle.
Right. Well, if you like the deck and the way that Doomsday has been presented to you by Max, the expert, locally for us, we'll have his stuff in the description for you, as well as the deck list. Make sure if you're liking our content, especially the deck text, follow, subscribe, like, all that stuff, and we'll see you
Comment.
next time. Don't forget to comment, though.
Yeah.
We'll see you next time.